The gift that changed everything. The Galactic Council had long held dominion over the known universe, ruling with an iron grip that kept younger civilizations under its control. It had been centuries since any new species had risen to prominence, and even longer since one had dared to challenge the status quo. But then came the humans. They were nothing remarkable at first, just another newly spacefaring race, struggling to survive in the vast emptiness beyond their homeworld. The Council watched them with mild curiosity, noting their chaotic nature, their reckless ambition, and their refusal to conform to the carefully structured galactic order. Unlike other species, humans lacked the biological advantages of many of the dominant races. They had no natural armor like the Xelfar, no psychic abilities like the Verakai, and no superior technology like the Tashva. Yet, despite these apparent weaknesses, humans thrived. For years, they remained a minor player on the interstellar stage, trading with other species, expanding their reach in small increments, and adapting to challenges in ways no one expected. But the true test came when the war began. The Galactic War and the desperate plea. The Galactic Council had been locked in a brutal conflict with the Dominion, a warlike empire that sought to overthrow the old order and install their own reign of terror. The Dominion had technology that matched or even surpassed that of the Council, and with each battle, the Council found itself losing ground. Desperate for reinforcements, the Council turned to every species under its banner, demanding ships, soldiers, and resources. The Yukar, the Ventari, the Alosh, all contributed to the war effort, yet it was never enough. The Dominion continued its relentless advance, pushing the Council closer to collapse. Then, as a last resort, they turned to the humans. Humans were not an official member of the Council, merely an observer race. They had been deemed too young, too unpredictable, and too underdeveloped to hold a seat among the great powers. But now, none of that mattered. With a mix of arrogance and desperation, the Council approached humanity with a simple proposition. They would be given a single warship, one ship, advanced beyond anything humanity had ever seen, gifted as a means to test their military capabilities. The humans could assist in minor engagements, provide logistical support, and prove their worth. It was a gesture made out of necessity, but also out of condescension. The Council expected the humans to fail, to struggle with technology beyond their comprehension, and ultimately to serve as little more than a symbolic ally. They could not have been more wrong. The ship that launched a revolution, the ship given to humanity, was called the Vanguard, a state-of-the-art battlecruiser equipped with the latest in Council weaponry and defenses. A single ship, meant to be a mere token of their involvement. But humans did not see it as a token. They saw it as a blueprint. In less than a year, they had reverse-engineered the Vanguard, breaking down its systems piece by piece, learning its secrets, and understanding its construction better than even its original creators. Where the Council had spent centuries refining their technology, humans refined it in months. Where other species adhered strictly to tradition, humans innovated. They stripped down inefficiencies, redesigned power systems, improved weapons output, and even managed to integrate their own experimental AI into the ship's core. And then, without warning, they began building. Within 5 years, humanity had constructed an entire fleet, not just a handful of ships, but an armada, warships, carriers, destroyers, all based on the Vanguard's design, but improved in ways the Council had never imagined. By the time the Council realized what was happening, it was too late. A fleet unlike any other. The Dominion launched a massive offensive, targeting key Council worlds in a final bid to end the war. The Council, already weakened, scrambled to defend itself, but the outcome seemed inevitable. Their fleets were outnumbered, their forces spread too thin, and their morale shattered. And then, the humans arrived. What should have been a ragtag force of inexperienced fighters turned out to be a disciplined, highly coordinated fleet with technology on par with the most advanced Council warships. The battle that followed became legend. Humanity did not fight like the Council. They did not follow rigid strategies, nor did they rely on outdated doctrines. Instead, they adapted in real time, using tactics no one had ever seen before. Their eye-assisted targeting systems predicted enemy movements before they happened. Their ships moved with uncanny precision, coordinating firepower in ways that overwhelmed the Dominion's fleets. In a matter of hours, the Dominion offensive was broken. What had been a battle for survival became a rout. The humans pursued their enemies relentlessly, driving them back system by system, reclaiming lost territory, and ultimately turning the tide of the war. The Council watched in stunned silence as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. The new power in the galaxy. With the war won, the Council faced a new reality, one in which humans were no longer a minor player. They had given humans one ship, one single ship, and in return, humans had built an empire of steel and fire. Some within the Council feared what this meant. They whispered of humanity's unchecked ambition, of the dangers of an upstart race rising too quickly. Others saw opportunity. An ally unlike any other, a force that could redefine the balance of power in the galaxy. But humanity had no interest in politics. When the war was over, they did not demand tribute. They did not seek to claim council worlds or install themselves as rulers. They simply returned home, their fleets standing guard, not as conquerors, but as defenders. The message was clear. Humanity had proven its worth, and they would not be ignored again. And so, the galaxy changed forever. The humans had been underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked. But now, they were a force to be reckoned with. And this was only the beginning. The unforeseen consequences of underestimation. The aftermath of humanity's intervention in the war sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. What was meant to be a symbolic gesture, gifting a single warship to an unproven race, had led to the rise of a new military superpower. The Council had miscalculated, and now they found themselves in an uneasy position. The humans had not just proven their effectiveness in warfare. They had shattered the existing hierarchy. Their ability to reverse engineer, innovate, and mass-produce warships at an unprecedented rate had caught the attention of every major species. It was a disruption unlike any the Council had seen before. But the greatest question remained unanswered. What would humanity do now? Would they demand a seat among the ruling elite? Would they seek revenge for the years of neglect and condescension? Or would they continue to operate as a wild card, unpredictable and uncontrollable? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. The Council's dilemma. In the towering halls of the Galactic Council's capital, representatives from dozens of species gathered in hushed whispers. The chamber, usually filled with heated debates and strategic discussions, was now drowned in uncertainty. At the center of the chamber stood Chancellor Vorkai, an elder of the Selfar species and the longest-serving leader of the Council. He was among those who had initially dismissed humanity, believing them to be an insignificant species with little to offer. Now he had no choice but to address the crisis at hand. "We have witnessed a development unlike any in our recorded history," Vorkai announced, his voice firm but carrying an edge of unease. "The humans have proven themselves to be resourceful, dangerous even. We must decide how we will proceed." A murmur spread through the chamber. Some, particularly the HFY and the Verakai, were openly wary of humanity's sudden rise. Others, like the Yukar and the Ventari, saw an opportunity for alliance. Ambassador Relfar of the Alosh spoke first. "They saved us. Without their intervention, the Dominion would have crushed our fleets and dismantled the Council entirely. We owe them a debt." Ambassador Syvran of the Tashvi countered immediately. "A debt, perhaps. But at what cost? We gave them a single warship, and in return, they built an armada that rivals our own. Tell me, what happens when they decide that they no longer need us?" The chamber fell silent. It was a question that no one wanted to ask, yet it lingered in the minds of every leader present. The humans had displayed no outward hostility toward the Council, but their capacity for rapid expansion and military buildup was a growing concern. Even the Dominion, once the greatest threat to the galaxy, had been pushed into retreat within a matter of months. What else were the humans capable of? Vorkai raised a hand for silence. There is only one way to understand their intentions. We must call upon them to join the Council. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The thought of granting humanity a formal seat among the galactic powers was almost unthinkable. Yet what alternative did they have? The invitation. A delegation was sent to Earth, led by high-ranking Council diplomats and military officials. It was a mission of both diplomacy and reconnaissance. They needed to gauge humanity's ambitions, whether they would be a partner or a rival in the new galactic order. Upon arrival, they found Earth in the midst of a transformation. The planet, once a patchwork of divided nations, was now unified under a single governing body, the Terran Accord. Though political and cultural differences remained, humanity had recognized that their survival in the galactic theater required unity. The Council envoys were met with a level of hospitality they had not expected. The humans, though wary, did not display any outward hostility. They welcomed discussions, engaged in trade negotiations, and even allowed the Council officials to tour their new shipyards. It was there, in the depths of space above Mars, that the true scope of humanity's power became evident. The delegation had anticipated seeing a few newly constructed warships, perhaps a small fleet meant to secure their borders. Instead, they were met with an industrial marvel beyond their comprehension. Dozens of orbital shipyards stretched across the Martian skyline, each one producing warships at an efficiency that defied logic. Hundreds of vessels, destroyers, carriers, battlecruisers, were already operational, while thousands more were in various stages of construction. The realization hit the Council delegation like a cold wave of dread. The humans weren't preparing for war. They were preparing for something far greater. The Shadow War begins. Even as diplomatic talks continued, cracks began to form within the Council itself. Some species saw the humans as a necessary ally, a powerful force that could ensure long-term stability in the galaxy. Others saw them as an existential threat, a species that had risen too quickly and disrupted the balance of power. It was only a matter of time before factions began to form. Secret meetings were held in the darkest corners of the Council's capital. Private communications were exchanged between certain species, each one weighing their options. Some sought to forge deeper alliances with humanity, ensuring that they remained on their side should conflict arise. Others began quietly mobilizing their forces, preparing for a war that had not yet begun. And then, the first strike came. A Terran research vessel, conducting experiments on the outer edges of Council space, was destroyed under suspicious circumstances. Official reports claimed it was an accident, an engine failure, a navigational error, but the humans knew better. The wreckage bore signs of weapon fire, advanced plasma burns that were consistent with Council warships. It was not a declaration of war, not yet, but it was a message. Someone within the Council wanted humanity gone. The gathering storm. Back on Earth, Admiral Elias Carter, the supreme commander of the Terran Armada, stood before a holographic display of the known galaxy. His eyes traced the shifting borders, the movement of fleets, the silent war being waged behind closed doors. "They're afraid of us," he muttered. Beside him, Director Anna Vasquez of the Terran Intelligence Bureau nodded grimly. "They should be. But fear makes people unpredictable. If certain factions believe they can take us out before we grow too powerful, they won't hesitate." Carter exhaled sharply. "Then we make sure they understand the consequences." With a single command, the Terran Armada began mobilizing, not for war, but for deterrence. Warships were positioned at key strategic points, fleets were reinforced, and defense networks were strengthened. The message was clear. Humanity had no desire for conquest, but if war was brought to them, they would not hold back. And so, the galaxy stood on the edge of a knife. Some hoped for peace, others prepared for war. And in the shadows, Forces moved unseen, setting the stage for a conflict that would shake the very foundations of the cosmos. Humanity had changed the rules of the game. Now, it was only a matter of time before the galaxy decided its next move. The silent war begins. The galaxy had always operated under a delicate balance of power. The Galactic Council, for centuries, had maintained control, ensuring that no single race ever grew too dominant, that no species rose above its station. But humanity had shattered that balance in mere years. They had taken a single gifted warship and built an Armada. They had reversed centuries of technological stagnation with sheer ingenuity. And now, they had forced the Council into an impossible position. To the public, the Council maintained an air of diplomacy, extending a formal invitation for humanity to take a seat among the galactic elite. But behind the scenes, a storm was brewing. Factions within the Council saw the truth. Humanity's rise was not just unexpected, it was unnatural. No species had ever advanced this quickly. No civilization had ever turned the tide of war so decisively. It was only a matter of time before someone decided to act. The assassination attempt. On the surface of Titan, one of Saturn's moons, a historic meeting was set to take place. A delegation from the Galactic Council was scheduled to meet with Terran leaders to finalize the terms of humanity's entry into the Council. It was meant to be a symbol of unity, a demonstration that humanity had earned its place among the stars. But not everyone wanted that future. As the Terran leadership arrived at the meeting site, an explosion rocked the landing zone. Fire and debris erupted into the sky as emergency sirens blared. The protective shields had been sabotaged. Security forces scrambled to secure the area, but the attack had been precise, deliberate. Admiral Elias Carter, who had been en route to the meeting, watched from the command bridge of the TSS Resolute as chaos unfolded below. His expression hardened. "This wasn't an accident," he said. "Somebody wanted to send a message." The message was clear. Humanity's presence in the Council would not be tolerated. The Council fractures. In the aftermath of the Titan attack, blame was swift. The Terran government accused extremist factions within the Council of orchestrating the attack. The Council, in turn, denied involvement, claiming it was the work of rogue elements. But behind closed doors, the cracks in the Council's unity had begun to widen. Several species, the Yukar, the Ventari, and the Alosh, openly sided with humanity, seeing them as a stabilizing force in a chaotic galaxy. Others, like the HFY and the Verikai, saw them as an existential threat, a species that had risen too quickly and had to be stopped. Chancellor Vorkai, the aging leader of the Council, was barely holding the factions together. His voice of reason was no longer enough. "The humans saved us from destruction," he argued in a closed session of the Council. "They have earned their place." Ambassador Syvern of the HFY slammed a clawed hand against the table. "They have earned nothing but suspicion. You saw what they did with a single ship. Imagine what they will do once they control entire fleets." The room fell into tense silence. For the first time in centuries, the Council was on the verge of collapse, and in the shadows, unseen forces moved to tip the scales. The rise of the Silent Coalition. While the Council bickered, a secret alliance began to take shape. A coalition of powerful species, fearing humanity's rise, formed a clandestine pact. They called themselves the Silent Coalition, a fitting name for an operation that would never be acknowledged publicly. Their goal was simple: to curb humanity's power before it grew beyond control. Their methods, however, were far from simple. Sabotage, espionage, psychological warfare. Their first target was not Earth itself, but its allies. If they could isolate humanity, cut them off from their growing network of supporters, then they could contain the threat before it spiraled further out of control. The attacks begin. In the cold void of space, a convoy of Yukar warships was making its way toward Earth, carrying diplomats who had pledged their support to humanity. The ships never arrived, An accidental navigational error led them straight into an asteroid field, where pre-planted explosives detonated their hulls. No survivors. On the Verakai homeworld, a pro-human senator was found dead in his quarters, poisoned by an unknown toxin. The council ruled it as a natural death, but the Terran Intelligence Bureau knew better. Then, a critical data breach occurred at Mars Shipyard. A virus, sophisticated beyond anything humanity had encountered before, disabled production across half the orbital facilities. It took weeks to undo the damage. The message was clear. Humanity's rise would not be unchallenged. A warning from the shadows. Admiral Carter sat in the war room aboard the Resolute, surrounded by his most trusted officers and intelligence operatives. The list of attacks and sabotage attempts had grown too long to ignore. "They're bleeding us without firing a single shot," Director Ana Vasquez of the Terran Intelligence Bureau said grimly. "They know they can't beat us in open war, so they're dismantling us from the inside." Carter clenched his jaw. "Then we stopped playing defense." A new directive was issued. Humanity would not just respond to these attacks, they would hunt down those responsible. The Terran Intelligence Bureau deployed its best operatives to infiltrate the highest levels of the Council. The Armada's Black Ops Division, Shadow Fleet, was mobilized for the first time in history. If the galaxy wanted to play dirty, humanity would show them just how good they were at the game. A declaration in the dark. On an uncharted moon in deep space, a secret meeting took place. The silent coalition's leaders gathered in a hidden station, convinced that their plans were moving forward undetected. But they were wrong. As they discussed their next move, the station's power flickered. Communications were jammed. Emergency lights bathed the room in a crimson glow. Then, a voice echoed over their systems. "You thought we wouldn't find you." Panic spread through the room. Weapons were drawn. Orders were shouted. But it was already too late. One by one, the lights went out. And then, silence. By the time the Council realized what had happened, the silent coalition's leadership had disappeared without a trace. No explanation. No evidence. Only a single message was broadcast across encrypted channels. "We are not your enemy, but if you make us one, you will not survive." The war that never came. The galaxy watched in silence. The attacks stopped. The sabotage ceased. Those who had moved against humanity suddenly found their operations dismantled, their forces compromised, their leaders missing. The Council, sensing the shifting tides, knew that the war they had feared might never come, not because of diplomacy, but because humanity had already won. Not through conquest, not through politics, but through an understanding that few species had ever mastered. War is not just fought on battlefields. It is fought in the mind, in the shadows, in the spaces between words and actions. And in that kind of war, humanity was unmatched. The galaxy was forever changed. And this was only the beginning.